system of classification. So basically, there are three main types of classification that we're going to discuss. First is artificial, then natural, then phylogenetic. Okay, starting with the artificial system. So as the name itself says here, artificial classification means something that was done very primitively and that is based on certain superficial or artificial characters. Okay, so it is mainly based on morphological features of an organism. Okay, and that's why it is not most of the time very appropriate. It brings about distantly related organisms together, and that means unrelated organisms are brought together and related organisms are sometimes separated. Alright, so that's the problem with artificial classification. So see here, the earliest system of classification were artificial and involves usage of one or few morphological characters for grouping organisms. For example, classification within angiosperms was based only on characters such as habit, color, number, and shape of the leaves, etc. Likewise, say among animals also, if I try to classify animals on the basis of their habitat, if I place the organisms which are terrestrial together and organisms which are aerial together and aquatic together, do you think I will be bringing together only similar organisms? No. So in that case, the very basis of classification itself is lost, right? Classification means what? We are supposed to bring similar organisms together, but based on certain superficial parameters, when we bring organisms together, usually we end up bringing together unrelated organisms, and that's what happens in artificial classification. All right. So see here, such systems were based mainly on vegetative characters or on androecium structure. The androecium structure means the length of the stamen. Accordingly, Carolus Linnaeus, father of taxonomy, isn't it? Carolus Linnaeus, he had tried to classify the angiosperms based on the length of the stamen or structure of the androecium. So this system is also referred as sexual system of classification by Linnaeus. So all of that would be included under artificial system of classification. Alright. Now, proponents means followers who would follow artificial or who had followed artificial classification is Aristotle and Linnaeus. Alright, Carolus Linnaeus. Drawbacks. I've already told you there are various drawbacks to this system. First is we completely lose the very basic idea of classification itself. Right? We are bringing in unrelated organisms together and we are separating the related ones. That's the first and foremost drawback to artificial system of classification. See here, they separated closely related species and brought together distantly related ones. Likewise, another very important drawback is that artificial classification gives equal weightage or importance to vegetative and sexual characteristics of the organisms. You should know one very important thing, that when evolution occurs or with time, mainly the vegetative characteristics of the plants, means the root or the leaf or stem, these vegetative characteristics, they start changing. Reproductive characteristics are mostly very conservative in nature. They seldom change. So in artificial classification, giving equal importance or weightage to vegetative and sexual characteristics or reproductive characteristics is of course not justified. Fine. Now, next is natural system of classification. Now, because artificial system of classification had so many flaws, that's why natural classification system was formed, and this is as such. Organisms in this system are classified on the basis of natural affinities and consider not only external but also internal features like ultrastructure, anatomy, embryology, phytochemistry, etc. So mainly, see, artificial classification system had so many flaws. Why? Because it was mostly based on external features or morphology. Now, natural system of classification was a way of rectifying the flaws of artificial system of classification. That's why natural system of classification is not only based on external features, that is morphology, rather it also takes into consideration many internal features of an organism like ultrastructure, anatomy, embryology, etc. Alright, so that's how natural system of classification is much much more appropriate or much more valid in comparison to the artificial system of classification. Alright, proponents are George Bentham and Joseph Dalton Hooker, who gave classification of angiosperms under the natural system. Alright, finally, the third and the last one, phylogenetic classification. Phylogeny, the term itself means study of evolutionary history of an organism. So under phylogenetic system of classification, we only try to classify those organisms together who share a common ancestor. Okay, that means if an organism have a common ancestor or they all have descended from a common organism, only then they are supposed to be kept together under a classification system. Otherwise, they won't be considered together. This, of course, is presently used and is very, very, appropriate way of classifying. The only problem is that phylogenetic classification, which is based on evolutionary studies, isn't it? Based on studies based on ancestors. That's why it is very much dependent on fossil records, which are most of the time not available or not entire. That's how sometimes phylogenetic classification might get delayed. Alright, but otherwise it's a very, very appropriate way of classifying. Alright, so see here, it is based on evolutionary relationships between various organisms, assuming that organisms belonging to same taxa have common ancestors. The fossils play important role in elucidation of evolutionary relations. Alright, proponents or followers would be Engler and Pruntle, Hutchinson and Thaktajan. Alright. So this being said regarding the three types of classification system, now let us go into a little bit of further discussion regarding branches of taxonomy. There are various branches of taxonomy based on the parameter being used for classification. Okay, mainly we are discussing here three types which are very important. First is numerical taxonomy, also called phonetics. See, it involves the usage of numerical methods for evaluation of similarities and difference between species with the help of computer. So what you mainly do here is that you try to compare two organisms, alright, based on hundreds of their characters, giving certain signs, okay, using certain signs. Say for similarities we use the sign plus, okay, for dissimilarity we use the sign minus, and for no data or sufficient data not being available we use the sign 0 or theta. Alright, so using certain signs and symbols and using a computer when hundreds of characters of an organism and their similarities and dissimilarities are evaluated, that will fall under numerical taxonomy or phonetics. It's a very, very advanced way of classifying organisms, and of course it is very, very valid or appropriate. Fine. Next, Cyto Taxonomy. Alright, Cyto Taxonomy is based on the study of you can say chromosomes or chromosomal behavior or number. Mainly it is based on the study of the nucleus. Alright, so see, it is based on cytological information like chromosome number, how many chromosomes does a particular species have, chromosome structure, likewise chromosomal behavior during cell division, that means during mitosis or meiosis, likewise based on this, based on mainly chromosome. When the classification would be done, that will fall under Cyto Taxonomy. And the last one is Chemo Taxonomy. From the name itself, you know it's chemical, right? Chemo Taxonomy after all. So Chemo Taxonomy mainly classifies the plants because it is considered that plants, they're like inside because plants, they don't move around, isn't it? They are non-motile. That's why the chemicals inside their body are much more stable. Okay, and they are not much prone to change over time in comparison to animals. So that's why Chemo Taxonomy, which is a classification based on internal constituents or chemical constituents of an organism, mainly classifies the plants and not animals. All right, so see here, it is based on chemical constituents of plants. For example, DNA sequence, chemical nature of proteins, crystals which are present in plants like calcium carbonate or calcium calcium carbonate, calcium oxalate, etc. Aromatic compounds, etc. Alright. Crystals like calcium carbonate, calcium oxalate, all of that, and aromatic compounds, etc. So that being said regarding the important branches of taxonomy as well. So this is all related to the part of classification that we were to discuss in this particular chapter. Now in the next class, we'll start as usual with plants, and we'll start with the first and the most primitive plants, that is algae.